Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the session after lunch. I am particularly delighted being here for purely personal reasons. The purely personal reasons are A, that I owe a lot to the Association of Muslim Professionals. I have been watching them grow for the last 12 years. I have been with them from almost day one, and I am extremely proud of the fact that here is an institution that has not only stood the test of time but has grown so well. So I'm really very happy. I mean, that's purely personal, as I said, and congratulations to all of you for that. The second reason is because I have a panel that is full of very dear friends. I can't tell Ram how wonderful it is to see him after so long. I've known Ram for years. Unfortunately, he decided to not meet me for so long, but he had to today. So wonderful seeing all of you. And Akram, I know well for some time now. So good to have met all of you. And good to get back to one of my favorite cities. I stayed in Bangalore for a couple of years, taught here. It remains one city that I like a lot. I am going to do something that I don't usually do. I am going to be very rude. I am going to talk for 15 minutes or so, take a few questions and then run away because I actually have a flight to take. I don't want to do that, but today I have to. What I want to talk to all of you about is actually just two things. The first part, I want to talk about what I think are the Indian Muslims' economic challenges. In the second part, I am going to talk about what I think you all can do to address those challenges. That's all. I just want to divide my talk into these two parts. Why am I talking to you about this? Who am I? Why should you be listening to me? The reason I am talking about this is because in the last 6 years, I have been involved in 3 big studies that have looked at the Muslims' economic and social issues. The first committee that I was a member of is very famously known as the Kundu Committee. It is also known as the Post-Sachar Evaluation Committee. The Post-Sachar Evaluation Committee was set up by Prime Minister Manmohan Singh to look at what happens to Indian Muslims 8 years after the Sachar Committee recommendations. So we were set up by the Prime Minister in 2013 and we looked at what has happened and has anything changed as far as the Indian Muslim is concerned from 2006 to 2013. That was my first research work done on the economic situation of Indian Muslims. So one reason I'm talking to you about the Muslim economic situation is because of what I learned during that study. A few years later, when the new government took over, then we did another study across 14 Indian states on how India's socio-economic conditions change for the vulnerable sections of society. That's the second study that I did. And the third very recent study was where I was asked by the Chief Minister of Telangana to study the socio-economic conditions of Muslims in the state of Telangana. That's called the Sudhir Committee, which submitted its report 2 years ago. That's from where I am going to talk to you about. So the first issue is a question to all of you. And my question to all of you is that if you, using your knowledge, your experience, your education, your exposure to this problem, if I ask each one of you to name the biggest problem that Muslims in India face. So how many of you will say education? So education, poverty, honesty, okay. Yeah? Mindset. Anybody else? Double standards. Okay, we are talking economics, please. I know these are definite, these are very important problems. Mindset, double standard, honesty, but I don't know anything about them. I am a poor economist. Discrimination is not a bad answer. Discipline, yeah, very good. That's a good one. Sustainable source of income. Awareness, very good. Selfishness, all right. Anything else? Any new, yeah? Financial illiteracy, good point. Zakat, very good, yeah. Ignorance. Give me that bottle. Yeah, one. Yeah, maybe bottle. Thank you. All right, so are these right answers? Of course, these are right answers. All these are problems that Muslims face. But if you ignore the big ones like discrimination, deprivation, illiteracy, ignorance, in hardcore economic terms, the study that we did points to one very interesting fact, and that is that the biggest problem that Indian Muslims face, the biggest economic problem that Indian Muslims face is the lack of assets. What I mean is that in the cities it is lack of housing, in the villages it is lack of any ownership of land. So if you compare across religions, what we call as socio-religious groups, right? The Indian demographers divide populations into socio-religious groups. Socio-religious groups are upper caste Hindu, OBC, backward class Muslim, upper caste Muslim, SC, ST, other religions. This is the standard classification that we use. In this standard classification, the community with the lowest access to assets is the Muslim. So if you look at economic backwardness, the single biggest problem is the lack of assets. In Hyderabad, just to give you an example, in Hyderabad, 60% of the Muslim in Hyderabad city has about 50 lakh or 5 million Muslims. In the city of Hyderabad, 60% of Muslims do not have housing. 60% of Muslims live in rented house. The 40% who have houses, 60% of those have what some of you might know as kacha houses. A kacha house is a house without a roof. So of the 40% who have a house, 60% have kacha houses. If you see the non-Muslim category, it will be exactly the opposite. 60% of non-Muslims have a house. Of the 40% that have housing, 40% have kacha houses, where 60% have pakka houses. So it's exactly the opposite. So the first major problem is housing. Now, how are we going to help this situation? I will come to in the second part. But the first problem is housing. And now let me also spend 2 minutes in lecturing as an economist. Across the world, the single biggest poverty alleviation measure, I will ask this as a question to you, that if you are the prime minister or if you are the policy maker in any country and you want to remove poverty from this area, okay, get my question, that in this country this area is poverty stricken. What will you do? If I ask you to do one thing to remove poverty, what will you do? the single most effective measure to remove poverty. Access to credit, very good answer. Educate, number 3. So number 1 is always housing. You know, anywhere in the world, if you want to remove poverty, give the poor one asset. That is the surest way of removing poverty. That is why post-independence India, the first thing we did was, for poverty alleviation, the first policy that we implemented was land reform. That we tried to give land to everybody. Which was the state which was the most successful in undertaking land reforms? Not Kerala, not Bengal, not Karnataka, not in the south. It was the state of Jammu and Kashmir. You know, the reason Sheikh Abdullah was respected was because of his land reform, and that's why you will find the level of poverty in Kashmir is very low. Kashmir has 100 other problems, but poverty is not one of them, and that's because of land. So therefore the first issue is land. Land holding, asset, home, a 2-bedroom house, a 1-bedroom, whatever, that is the first important thing, and that is where the Muslims lack the most. What's the second issue? That if you can't give land, giving land is difficult, right? It is very expensive. How can you give land to all the poor? So that is why land reforms did not work. We stopped doing that. Now you can't do number 1. What is the second thing that you do? What is the second most important or effective way of reducing poverty? Employment is number 4. 6. Livelihood, employment, all that comes down. Own house is number 1. What's the second? This is all number 8, 9, 10. Education is number 3. Women comes down. The second, so time up. The second is migration. You know, very often people are poor because they live in a miserable area. You can't do anything there. If you are living in some God-forsaken area in Chhattisgarh, nothing you do will help. You have to get them out and get them to Bombay. And you know why this is important? Given the current political setup, the current political problem we are facing is because of this problem that migration faces. Nobody likes migration. I migrate from this poor area to this area. Now I don't want others to migrate there. So migration is politically a minefield, which is what we are facing right now. This whole problem is because of this attitude against migration, this inability to understand that the second most effective way of fighting poverty is to encourage physical mobility. It is because 1 and 2 are difficult. It is because we can't give land to everybody, and because migration is such a political hot potato, that we do education. Education is the cheapest poverty intervention. It is not the most efficient. What will you do with a degree if there are no jobs? At 37% educated unemployment in India today, of what use is giving education to anybody? You know, we have the highest level of educated unemployment in the world today. 37% of India's youth, educated youth, is unemployed. Overall unemployment rate is 7%. Educated unemployment rate is 37%. You know which country had 37% last in the recent past? Not even Zimbabwe. It was Greece. What did Greece do when it had when it reached 35% educated unemployment rate? When it reached 35%, what Greece did was it removed its prime minister. You know, it is very strange. It sacked the prime minister. It was very strange. 2 months ago, on the same day, in the US, 50,000 jobs were lost on one day. That day, Donald Trump's rating went down from 46 to 42%. On one day, 50,000 jobs were lost. On the same day in India, 5 lakh jobs were lost. And the Prime Minister's rating went up from 52 to 62%. We are a crazy country. I mean, it's a very strange thing that happened. His rating that day went up by 10%. Anyway, so therefore, the first two issues that I am talking to you about are housing and migration. These are two issues on which most of us do very little. All of us focus on the easier thing of education. Education is important. I don't have to tell you, this group, about how important education is. But given the situation in the country today, given the number of jobs, given the falling number of jobs, education is not going to lead us to any great alleviation of poverty. And that is what brings me to what came from the stage. In our work with the Sudhir Commission in Hyderabad, we found that the Hyderabadi Muslim, and which is exactly the same problem with the Muslim in Bangalore, that the big problem that the city Muslim faces is a complete lack of access to credit. In the Hyderabad calculation, it is such a sad reflection. In our calculation in Hyderabad, if you are a small businessman, as you know is not, somebody who earns 5 lakhs or 10 lakhs, somebody who does 5,000 and 10,000. If you are a small businessman in the city of Hyderabad, the interest rate that you pay for a small loan is 60%. So if you are Muslim in Hyderabad, you are paying 60% interest rate. If you are non-Muslim in Hyderabad, you are paying 16%. That's the difference. It is just about impossible at 60% interest to have any return on investment. And the reason people struggle year after year, and you keep blaming them, saying, "Ye kya? He just pushes a hawker's cart and doesn't develop." How will she? If you have to pay 60% interest, how will you ever go beyond a certain level? So that is why this third issue, which is access to credit, and I know some of you do this work phenomenally well, and I can't tell you how much I respect those of you who are working in this very difficult area. Ram, I can't tell you how important your work is by way of being able to provide safe, secure, quick credit. I'm not going to talk about the intricacies. It's a subject that Ram knows better. He will tell you about it, how difficult it is to do it, but it is the most important intervention that we can think of. The final point that I make is related to this problem of migration. And I'm talking about migration because of what is happening in the country today. Why are we all so worried about this Citizenship Act and this National Population Register and so? Any country that restricts movement of people within the country cannot have a strong economy. In India, of the total number of people who migrate, let me step back a little bit. Do Indians migrate? Do Indians move from villages to cities? Yes? India is the slowest urbanizing country in the world. The rate of urbanization in India is the slowest among all developing countries. There is no respectable country in the world which has 70% of its population living in villages. Our country, 70% people live in villages. In states like Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Orissa, 90% live in villages. Our villages, I don't know how many of you are familiar with villages. Most of you are familiar with a village from, Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge. That Shah Rukh Khan's village, where he is dancing in those green fields with mustard flowers, with nice fat cows, is a village in Punjab in December. Our village is this sad village near Tumkur in July. When it's brown, when it rains, there is stagnant water, when animals are dying, when there is flu in the air. It is awful, it is miserable. In villages in Bihar, 6 months of drought follows 6 months of floods. In that situation, why do people continue to live in these miserable villages? Why don't they come to Bangalore? Why don't they come to Bombay? Why don't they come to Delhi? In the 1990 forecasts, if you compare city populations, you will find that populations in Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, Madras are 1 million less than what we had forecasted. In India, people do not move. And which is the socio-religious group that migrates the least? The Muslim rate of migration is lower than every other rate of migration. And you know why that is even more surprising? Because the Muslims' urbanization rate is the highest. While 31% of India lives in cities, 39% of Muslims live in cities. And yet the rate of urban migration of the Muslims is the slowest. Muslims do not have land, so it is not land that is holding them back in the village. Right? They don't have jobs in the village, so it is not that is holding them back. Then why are they not moving to villages? And that is where I finish my talk by saying that is it because our cities are hostile cities? Is it because if I come as a Manipuri to Bangalore, I get beaten up? If I go as a Bihari in Bombay and drive a taxi, I get beaten to death? Is it because I speak, Punjabi in Hyderabad that I get ridiculed? Is that the reason we are not migrating? Or is it that we don't have enough infrastructure in cities?
Testing.
Mohammed Yunus and the transformation in Bangladesh is primarily because of the availability of quick microfinance. If you see Bangladesh's transformation, it is only because of one thing. Bangladesh did not do too much by way of education. Bangladesh did not do too much by way of providing employment, livelihoods. It just gave small loans to everybody, especially women. Zero interest, small loans, 300 rupee loans. That all of you who are doing it, I would really like you to replicate and scale that up. Those who are not doing it, please take it up. It is a simple thing to do. There are enough people who will teach us how to do it. And if we can set up as many small microfinance enterprises, the better we will be. That is my first solution or suggestion. My second is that wherever possible, wherever we can influence the state, like we can in Telangana, what we are doing is, we are saying that we want more housing for Muslims. So one of the things that we got the Chief Minister to agree was that in this housing for the poor that is being done, 20% of the houses should go to Muslims. The proportion of Muslims in Hyderabad is 31%, but 20% at least should go to the poor Muslim. And if we can use our networks to help build housing for the poor, and it is possible. I am not getting into the details. Those of you who are the construction people will tell us better. that it is possible to provide simple, cheap houses to the poor. That's my second solution. You see, housing has several multiplier impact. It has a huge externality. When students have houses, one of the reasons why our kids don't study is because they don't have a roof, because there is no bulb in the house. You can't just blame people saying that this fellow is a lazy fellow, he doesn't study. I studied because I had a comfortable house and a big chair and a study table. Otherwise, I would have been, playing football somewhere. Maybe been better, but so housing is an important area that we have to focus on. And the third thing that we have to try and do is to enable an atmosphere where people feel comfortable, where people feel hospitable, where people feel encouraged to move from difficult areas to areas that have a higher economic concentration. Those are my 3 suggestions, and I know that in this hall at the AMP, these are suggestions that the Association of Muslim Professionals can work on. Thank you. Yeah. So are we taking questions? Yeah?
Maybe we can take a couple of questions
Okay.
if we have time.
Yeah, all right. So, okay, yeah, I have 5. So all of you know that so well, that the migration to the Middle East, it is there, and the amount it has contributed to well-being in our various states is enormous. We have not done work on this, and I wish to take up some of that, but the contribution it made to the economy in Kerala, in Karnataka, the contribution it made to economy in UP is enormous. And several livelihoods, several households, their whole standards of living got changed because somebody migrated to Dubai or Saudi Arabia or whatever for a few years. So that's a great example of how even temporary migration results in a significant improvement in standards of education, access to health, access to education, all of that. And you will see the same story if you go back to our state of, we share the same really poor state of Uttar Pradesh, and those of us who did better, the UPites who did better, are all the UPites who moved away from UP and came to Telangana or Karnataka, right? So it really is a big impact. That is a very important question. If there is any other question that I can answer. Yeah? All right. So the Sudhir Commission recommended several things. The first 2 were housing and finance, right? So we said that the government must provide cheap housing, especially to urban minorities, urban vulnerable populations, particularly the Muslim. Second thing we said was that cheap and easy finance must be available to all small enterprises. The third thing we said was that we need good quality schools and hospitals. And therefore, I don't know if you had the presentation by the the Telangana Residential Education Society. We have set up 201 schools for poor Muslim boarding schools. The fourth point was that we need quality health care, and if you draw a GIS map of health facilities anywhere in the country, you will find that health facilities are always lacking in Muslim areas. But the interesting thing is that if you do a classification of patients who go to government hospitals, the Muslim patient is always higher than the non-Muslim patient. In government hospitals, the trust of the Muslims is much higher than the trust of non-Muslims. Much higher. It is a very strange thing. You will find that everywhere, that more Muslims go to public hospitals than non-Muslims do. The next point we made was, and this is a difficult point. I'm just giving it to you. You should have your opinion on it. I'm not giving you my opinion. One question we asked was and this is a very interesting question. One question we asked everybody was that who should be the Muslim leader? Do Muslims need, in other words, the question is, do Muslims need Muslim leadership? I am not telling you. The answer was very interesting. The answer we got, we asked this question to about 4,000 Muslims and about 6,000 non-Muslims. The Muslims, when we asked them this question on should Muslims have Muslim leadership, the answer was no. They said we want a good leader. It doesn't matter Muslim or Hindu. And you know what the non-Muslims said? That Muslims need Muslim leadership. It was very strange. I don't know what it means. Think about it. It has several layers of issues. So we said that, there has to be some leadership. We didn't recommend Muslim or non-Muslim leadership, but we said that there have to be some avenues in which Muslim issues need to get highlighted. We then talked about the reservation issue. That should there be reservation for Muslims in schools, colleges and jobs? And one recommendation we made was that there should be 9% reservation. That calculation is there in that report. For those of you, all of you here are very familiar, very dexterous with numbers. You can study that to say why we came to 9%. But we recommended that. That went to the Prime Minister and it got thrown into the dustbin immediately. So that never got accepted. We made a couple more recommendations. We said that government offices should have, all big government offices should have officers who understand Urdu. Even now, a lot of people in Telangana go to a government office with applications written in Urdu. And there is nobody who can read them. So we said, and that's why that was one of the first things that the Chief Minister did. Now every collectorate in the 31 districts has two Urdu officers, and you can go there and get your applications written. Then we said something about transportation, metro. So we made several of those, about 8 of those got implemented. The big ones that did not get implemented were housing and reservation. But that we are continuing to work on. Yeah? Alright. So once again, thank you very much. Thanks especially to the AMP for inviting me here. Thanks to all of you for having listened to me. I will be more than happy to take any questions on email or WhatsApp. I'm very efficient on social media. I'm terrible on the phone. So please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.